What a terrible year for the DC universe. And The Flash didn't make things better for James Gunn and Warner Brothers. And now DC finally broke ties with Ezra Miller to end his tenure as The Flash. How bad was The Flash? Well, let's crack this puppy open and find out. The Flash has been in development hell for decades, with a massive number of actors and directors attached to the project. Warner Brothers began developing a Flash movie in the 1980s, and by 2004, the script was ready. That only took 20 years. The first Flash movie was ready to go with director David S. Goyer and Ryan Reynolds in the titular role. But that fell apart. Then Sean Levy was set to direct with Adam Brody as The Flash in 2007. That fell apart too. Zack Snyder became the visionary director of DC in 2010, and The Flash was passed to director David Dobkin, then Seth Grahame-Smith, and then Rick Fami, this guy. In 2016. In 2018, the duo of John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein were ready to take the reins. But in 2019, Andy Muschietti... What? Muschietti? Oh, Muschietti. Sorry. Andy Muschietti took over the Curse production and completed filming in 2021. What a shit show. There have been 45 writers who have had their paws on this script, adding layers of confusion to the story. A Frankenstein monster with a patchwork of revisions that turned this project into a nightmare for everyone involved.
I'm not transgender, non-binary. I don't want to be searched by a man.
Ezra Miller turned into his own version of Frankenstein with a string of arrests and mentally unstable behavior that only muddied the water for this movie's release, which finally happened on June 16th, 2023.
Yippee!
So how did it do in its theatrical run? Well, I'm glad you asked. Warner Brothers originally stated it had a production budget of $200 million.
You liar!
But the Hollywood Reporter disclosed that it was actually $300 million. Collider reported the advertising budget was $150 million, giving a total budget of $450 million bucks. Ouch! It had a total global box office of $270 million. So after a 50-50 split with the theaters, The Flash lost $315 million, a certified flop.
Well, that didn't work.
But from a screenwriting perspective, it seems kind of obvious why this movie was destined to bomb. I couldn't even find anyone who even liked this movie.
I am just ecstatic to say that this is a really good movie. I mean, it might even be pretty great. It's actually one of my favorite DC movies in a very long time.
I found one. The Flash utterly fails at every aspect of telling an entertaining story. It's bar none one of the worst superhero movies ever made, and I use no hyperbole when I make that statement. From the first scene, it tells an incoherent story that sloppily transitions from scene to scene. But believe it or not, there are actually two positives that I'll mention at the end of this video. Two.
He's fine.
There are three main elements to any well-constructed story, and ironically, there are three reasons why The Flash flopped. The first element is a relatable protagonist. The second, an antagonist who works against the protagonist. And the third, a conflict that consumes them both, pitting them against each other. And The Flash has major problems with all three. Surprise, surprise. Ezra Miller is the movie's first major problem, our protagonist. It was a huge mistake to think a second-rate actor who lacks charisma and talent could carry a superhero-based, high-budget feature film. There was a time it may have worked when the superhero genre was starting to bloom, but not in the Marvel Phase 5 superhero-fatigued world. There's very little about Ezra Miller that makes him a bankable star. Oh, actually, there's nothing about him that makes him a bankable star. Wait, gluing your tooth back in is a thing? Really?
That's stupid! Not you stupid! Him stupid!
It explains why Warner Brothers and Andrew Muschietti crammed as many cameo appearances in as they could, because a short time into filming, I'm sure they realized that he could not carry this movie. Next is the story and main conflict. With The Flash, well, there isn't one. It's probably the biggest reason why The Flash flopped as bad as it did. A sloppy, stitched-together Frankenstein story with no identifiable conflict that establishes itself over 144 minutes of movie time. The movie begins with a 15-minute chase scene that could be completely cut out of the movie as it has zero impact on the actual story. It's a pretentious opening that exists only to have Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot make cameo appearances. In fact, the only thing that it does do is make you wish the camera would have followed Ben Affleck and Batman instead of the Flash, because the next 2 hours and 10 minutes are an embarrassing example of a movie. But the opening scene would actually be easy to fix and make it relevant so that it has value to the movie and the plot. I would make the scene with the babies the place where Flash actually discovers his time travel. He could be pushed to the very edge, and just as a baby is about to hit the pavement, he enters a time breach and saves it from death. It would have given the opening scene a reason to exist, and Flash would have earned his time travel power. From there, we're introduced to the life of Barry Allen as he prepares for a retrial of his father's murder case.
You are one pathetic loser.
It's here that he discovers time travel and gets the idea to go back in time to change the past and prevent his mother from being murdered, and his father from being accused and convicted of the crime. His discovery of time travel at this point in the movie feels contrived and completely unearned. It would have worked so much better in the opening scene as a result of saving the lives of the babies, and it would have been earned. The movie then takes us in a series of subplots, from Barry saving his mom, real-life Barry losing his superpowers, and a pointless rehash of the General Zod scene from Man of Steel.
Sound familiar?
Which is completely pointless as it plays out exactly the same each time and adds no suspense, nor does it heighten the tension or the stakes. Why? Because it's already happened. We've seen it. And that's the biggest issue with this movie. We never get a coherent conflict that the Flash is actually working towards. It's just a mishmash of small subplots strung together and disguised as plot.
How much do you weigh?
180 each plus her 440.
Supergirl weighs 80 pounds.
You have put on a ton of weight.
There are endless, irritating scenes of Barry Allen interacting with his younger self, and a hodgepodge of side characters that are overacted and overdone. It isn't until the end of the movie that we are actually made aware of who the actual antagonist is supposed to be. It's Dark Flash, Bartholomew Henry Allen, a future version of Barry Allen who has turned into a dark and menacing bad guy after repeated attempts to prevent the death of the Justice League. We're only shown two very brief scenes of Dark Flash leading up to the final climax, making him a non-event across the course of the entire movie, and a completely useless antagonist. He has to have a larger role in the movie if he's going to be the antagonist. He has to act as a villain who impedes real-life Barry Allen. He could have been the one who is responsible for Barry losing his superpowers, as he actively works at stopping the Flash from correcting timelines. He should have been involved in subverting the Flash, and he should have had a larger role in doing so he actually has a reason to be in the movie. The final scene is an uninspired hot mess that delivers no payoff or any sort of satisfying climax, to a disaster of a storyline that gives audiences no reason to stay invested for 2 hours and 24 minutes. That leads us into the third broken element of this movie: a convincing antagonist who actively tries to defeat and thwart the protagonist from achieving his goal. Barry Allen, well, he doesn't have a goal that he is actively working towards.
We're bored. There's nothing to do.
With no goal for the protagonist, there can be no major conflict, tension, and stakes, which lends itself perfectly for an absentee antagonist. The addition of Michael Keaton's Batman, who was one of the very few interesting characters in this movie, was a cheap way of trying to insert a compelling narrative and seasoned actor into the storyline. But audiences aren't gullible enough to spend $20 just to watch member berries for a few minutes.
Да, это президент Путин.
Remember the Death Star? Remember cutting open tauntauns? Yeah, remember the Force?
Что это такое?
Hey, remember the Cold War? Oh, I love the Cold War. That was fantastic.
I also take issue with the fact that they dressed up Michael Keaton's Batman as an old man. He's literally wearing old man clothes. Damn it. If they really wanted to have a mother and son theme, they should have dialed up the emotional stakes between Barry and his mother. There should have been a scene with Barry at his mother's grave, where he had an emotional moment where the audience could see him in a vulnerable state, so we would appreciate the love he had for her. Or, well, maybe they did, and Ezra Miller just couldn't act out a warm and sentimental scene. I never thought of that. There is an endless list of questionable plot points that takes an already bad movie and adds insult to injury. The fact that Barry can just recreate his powers cheapens the value and should mean that anyone can have super speed power, does it not? And what's the chance that Barry Allen actually came back in time on the exact day that he becomes the Flash? That's quite the coincidence. I guess they wanted this to also be an origin story, so they had to stuff that subplot in as well. Again, they could have made Dark Flash the one manipulating time and being the one subverting Flash, since he is supposed to be the antagonist in the movie. So there are two good things that I'll mention about the Flash, because I hate just being a pure Debbie Downer. The final scene with his mother when he returns the tomato sauce is actually a nice moment. For anyone who has lost their mother, father, son, daughter, sister, or brother, or anyone they love, it made for a deep moment that connects and makes Barry Allen feel almost sympathetic. It's a moment in time that we would all love to experience if we could. The other positive? I really liked the George Clooney twist at the end. It was actually kind of clever, and I liked it. And that's all I have to say about The Flash. If you like what you heard, I thank you for watching. And if you didn't, I thank you all the same. And I'll see you in our next video.